I used to be a sonar operator aboard a diesel-electric submarine contracted for joint naval patrols in the North Atlantic. I'm not naming the boat or the country because I still technically signed paperwork that probably covers this. But honestly, I don't think anyone would officially acknowledge the patrol happened anyway. The mission itself wasn't unusual at first. Long underwater stretches, minimal communication, routine tracking assignments. The kind of deployment where days blur together because there's no sunlight, no fresh air, and no real sense of time outside the shift rotations. Most people think submarines are tense all the time, but honestly the scary part is usually boredom. Sonar duty especially. You spend hours listening to machinery hum, distant propellers, shifting currents, random ocean noise. After enough time underwater, your brain starts searching for patterns automatically. You notice tiny differences in sound the same way people recognize familiar voices in a crowded room. That's why the knocking stood out immediately. It happened during the third week of patrol, while we were moving through a deep section of ocean over an underwater trench. We were running quiet at the time, meaning almost everything unnecessary on board had been reduced or shut down to minimize noise output. The sonar room was dead silent except for equipment and headset audio. At around 1:10, I started hearing metallic impacts through passive sonar. Very faint at first, 3 knocks spaced evenly apart, then silence. About a minute later it happened again. 3 knocks, same spacing, same tone. At first I thought it was hull expansion or loose equipment somewhere on board. Submarines constantly make noises. Pipes shift, metal flexes under pressure, valves click. But this sound wasn't internal. The directionality was wrong. It was coming from below us. Not around us, beneath us. I marked it and reported it to the officer on watch. He listened for maybe 30 seconds through the spare headset and told me to classify it as geological activity. That answer didn't really make sense because geological sounds underwater are usually irregular. Grinding, rumbling, low-frequency vibration. This sounded deliberate. Clean metallic impacts with exact spacing between them. The weirdest part was depth. The sound profile suggested it originated deeper than the ocean floor itself. I know how ridiculous that sounds, but sonar works through timing and reflection. Whatever produced the knocking was registering below the seabed return. I reran the calculations 3 times because I thought the system was bugging out. The numbers stayed the same. The knocking continued for almost an hour before stopping completely. The next morning I mentioned it casually during meal rotation, thinking maybe another operator had heard similar sounds before. Nobody really answered. One of the older sonar guys just asked me what pattern I heard. I told him 3 evenly spaced knocks. He stopped eating immediately. Then he asked, did it repeat every minute or so? That was the first moment I started feeling genuinely uncomfortable. Turns out he'd heard it before during another patrol years earlier in the Norwegian Sea. Same pattern, same interval. According to him, command dismissed it back then too. That night I went through archived sonar logs looking for similar reports. Most classified patrol recordings weren't accessible from our terminal level, but older incident summaries still existed in the internal database. After enough searching, I found references to unexplained metallic impacts recorded during submarine operations going back decades. Different oceans, different vessels, Same description. Rhythmic metallic knocking from impossible depths. One report from the late 1960s included a transcript that made my stomach drop because the operator described the exact same 3-knock sequence before contact was lost with another submarine 2 days later. That submarine never resurfaced. Neither did the crew. I probably should have stopped digging after that, but being trapped underwater with information like that does something to your brain. Every sound starts feeling important. Every silence feels loaded. The patrol already had people on edge because communications with command were unusually limited during that deployment. We receive short encrypted bursts once every couple days, and that was it. Then the knocking came back. This time everyone in sonar heard it. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 knocks again. Only now there was an echo behind it. Not a normal echo from terrain reflection. More like another set of knocks responding farther away. The officer on watch ordered active sonar suppression immediately, which confused me because we hadn't used active sonar to begin with. We were only listening passively. Still, everyone followed procedure without arguing. The captain came into sonar himself maybe 10 minutes later. I'd barely seen him outside command during the patrol, so that alone told me something was wrong. He listened through my headset for less than 15 seconds before ordering all recordings isolated from the main archive. Not erased, separated. That distinction stuck with me. A few hours later, we changed course without explanation and descended deeper into the trench area. Nobody told us why. Rumors spread almost immediately because crews onboard submarines notice even tiny navigational changes. Some thought we were tracking another vessel. Others assumed there was equipment failure. Then one of the navigation guys quietly mentioned we were following the sound source. That messed with everybody. The atmosphere onboard changed after that. Conversations got shorter. People started snapping at each other over small things. Sleep got harder too because the knocking kept returning during night cycles. Always 3 knocks, sometimes distant. Sometimes so loud through sonar, it felt like someone hitting the outer hull with a hammer. One operator refused to continue his shift after hearing it directly overhead despite sonar showing empty water around us. He swore something moved across the submarine exterior while the sound played beneath us simultaneously. The captain confined him to quarters afterward. Around the 5th night, I finally heard something different mixed into the knocks. At first, I thought it was signal distortion. Static maybe, but after filtering frequencies, I realized there were voices buried underneath the impacts. Weak, broken, almost impossible to make out. I started isolating the audio manually and eventually caught a phrase clearly enough to understand. Hull breach. Then another voice, can't surface. I thought maybe we were intercepting some old transmission bouncing through thermal layers or leftover military junk frequencies. Weird signal reflections happen underwater sometimes, but the voices kept changing. Different accents, different audio quality, different eras. One clip sounded modern. Another sounded like an old radio recording from the Cold War. One had so much static it was barely human anymore. The only constant was panic. I brought the recordings to the officer on watch, expecting him to finally admit something was seriously wrong. Instead, he looked genuinely shaken for the first time since deployment. He asked me where I found the audio. I told him it was embedded beneath the knocking frequencies. Then he asked me not to tell the rest of the crew. That answer scared me more than the sounds themselves. Later that same shift, one of the engineers came into sonar and asked why we were matching distress signatures from missing submarines. Apparently someone higher up had already compared the recordings. The voice fragments corresponded to actual naval incidents stretching back over 50 years. Some of the submarines disappeared decades apart in entirely different oceans, but the distress phrases matched our audio almost perfectly. After that, people stopped pretending the patrol was normal. You could feel the paranoia spreading on board. Nobody wanted to say certain things out loud anymore. Crew members started avoiding the lower compartments during off hours because several people claimed they heard knocking through the inner hull even when sonar was silent. Not loud knocking either, soft, patient, like someone trapped somewhere underwater trying not to waste energy. Then came the final incident. We were moving slowly along the trench edge during reduced lighting conditions when sonar suddenly lit up with multiple returns directly beneath us. Not around us, underneath. That should have been impossible because we were already near crush depth margins above the ocean floor. The contacts didn't behave like submarines either. No propulsion noise, no cavitation. Just moving shapes rising slowly from below seabed level. Every return stopped directly under our position. Then the knocking started again. Only this time it came through the actual hull. 3 knocks. The entire sonar room froze. A second later, something answered from deeper below us. 3 more knocks. I remember looking at the other operators and realizing everyone had the same expression. Nobody understood what we were hearing, but every single person on board knew it wasn't mechanical failure. The captain ordered emergency ascent procedures almost immediately after that. No explanation, no discussion, just straight ascent. As we climbed, the sonar contacts followed for several minutes before disappearing all at once. Not fading, just gone. When we finally resurfaced, the patrol ended early and we returned to port under complete communication restriction. Intelligence personnel boarded before anyone else. They took recordings, logs, even handwritten notes from sonar stations. During debriefing, they told us the sounds were caused by unusual tectonic resonance conditions. Nobody believed that, especially after one of the intelligence officers accidentally referred to the knocking as recurring. I left submarine work 6 months later. A while after that, I started digging through naval archives online and found references to distress recordings from lost submarines. Some were publicly available, most weren't. But one thing kept bothering me: the timestamps. Several voice fragments we recorded on board belonged to submarines that disappeared before our vessel was even built. I still have a copy of part of the audio saved privately. I don't listen to it often anymore. But sometimes late at night, if I play the recording at very low volume through headphones, I can hear something underneath the distress calls. Very faint, metallic knocking, still repeating in the background behind the voices.